Hello, Jeanette. Good evening.
Hi.
Now, we're here this evening to talk a little bit about a news story which I actually spotted a couple of weeks ago. I took a photo of it and sent you via Facebook because this particular news story, not only was it eye-catching, but also as well, it struck me as a little bit strangely antiquated in its language, and it's because the Sun newspaper, and some people at home may well know, the Sun newspaper isn't the most rigorous journalistic endeavour attempted by mankind. The Sun newspaper reported on a British man, an American woman, his girlfriend, getting apparently kidnapped in Papua New Guinea and by cannibals. And I don't know. Do you want to talk a little bit more about this scenario, and then we'll talk a bit about why this is odd?
Yeah, so the report, which interestingly has now changed its headline. I just pulled it up online and it doesn't say cannibals anymore. But basically that a couple was hiking. They were kidnapped by a group of individuals described as so primitive that they were communicating using only grunts. And they were attacked, and they had some pretty serious like scars and injuries and photos of being slashed, and they, I guess, managed to get away from this group of attackers. But the whole story was basically couple attacked by primitive cannibals in the jungle who were trying to eat them, which many issues aside, just it seems like pure conjecture in the first place. Like there was nothing to
It almost
indicate
sounds
that
like
they were
something.
trying to eat them.
Well, exactly. Yeah, it almost sounds like a story where where perhaps on the way back they maybe bumped into a giant ape and then brought him back to New York and chained him up.
Yeah.
And that's why it struck me as so strange, is that this use of words like cannibal, savage, I don't know, primitive. These words aren't really words which I come across all very often, and that might maybe because I'm in a self-selecting group. I'm surrounded by archaeologists and anthropologists and fairly intelligent people, for the most part, and we just don't tend to use it. But I suppose the question is why don't we use those words? What is wrong with calling people savage or primitive or indeed cannibal? I mean, actually, let's tackle that. What about cannibals, anthropologist girl? Can you tell me have there been much in the way of documented cannibalism in human history?
So that I'm not a cannibalism expert, but to my understanding is like yes. So there is a history of cannibalism in many different cultural and societal groups, throughout time, almost always sort of ritualized in some manner.
So sort of maybe connected with warfare, this kind of thing.
Yeah, and a lot of the time it has to do with warfare, like you're eating the hearts of your enemies type scenarios. I'm heavily simplifying, but a lot of the times it's like consuming dead relatives. After they've passed away for natural causes, even something about inheriting their spirit. And yeah, so there have been some documented cases of maybe people in tribal communities kidnapping and eating other people, but I don't know. I find the information around these, they're always kind of really sketchy. And I think the important thing is trying to figure out and understand why this is taking place, like not just reducing a group of people to, they're cannibals, they just like eating people. So, if they're going to seize the opportunity to eat the random people hiking on the trail. Like that's not what's happening.
Yeah. And actually, I suppose in that sense, you start going down a very dangerous route if you think on those lines for too long. I mean, for example, actually, speaking of King Kong, the most recent iteration of that film, I think by Peter Jackson, was heavily criticised for its portrayal so-called natives. Everyone was sort of covered in mud. They were sort of a grim, despicable, sort of wretched form of humanity. Who, of course, they were living on this island. That's just what natives and primitives do. And the funny thing is that I think the criticism was undue, because actually he was referencing an artistic style to a certain extent. He was referencing films from earlier in the 20th century. But you end up with this sort of dichotomy invariably, whereby in that movie in particular, you actually have people like, this blonde white woman. Of course, she's going to get kidnapped by the ape, and then, I mean, we're not even going to go down the route of how that's linked in with broader thoughts linked with racism. But it is an interesting and dangerous language to use. I mean, in this particular article, I believe they say that these primitives who communicated with grunts, and I can't really think of any human society that communicates with grunts. I mean, maybe clicks when hunting,
yeah. I mean, there are varied, complex language systems that may or may not be interpreted as grunts to someone who is not familiar with the language. But I don't think that that's how people in Papua New Guinea speak to each other. No. I don't think that was. I mean, so. If you go on Google and you search cannibalism in Papua New Guinea, this is actually something that's a very big problem in this particular region, where it has been misrepresented as this area full of dangerous headhunters, and so there are violent incidents that occur, mostly muggings. Or, it's just very complicated. If you're trekking through a land, right, that someone else believes is theirs, and you're a white person, let's say, and you're unfamiliar, and you own things that are maybe of value, of commercial value on an island, people might come up and try to rob you, for example. That's something that happens. But yeah,
but then again, that happens in New York.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So that happens anywhere. Yeah. And this just, I think, just because these are tribal communities and there's lore and there is history of ritualized cannibalism on this island, it just gets extended. So it's you're not being mugged, you're being attacked by cannibals. And just, I don't know. Just the levels of misrepresentation of what's going on, and it just feeds, I think, further. I mean, if you go, so I found a website just geared towards people who are planning on trekking and hiking through these areas, and even those sites warn people of being attacked by cannibals, and I just, if you go looking and searching for actual incidents of this happening, I don't know where this information is coming from.
Okay, so I suppose the specifics of what this incident might have been, I guess, to one side, it is. I can already hear some people sort of saying, well, what's wrong with characterizing certain parts of the world in certain ways? For example, people. I mean, I have an Italian friend. He goes, "Hey, Mac, you want to drink tea with your fingers up in the air?" This kind of thing. And in some ways, it's a stereotype. It's at times an unwelcome and annoying thing. For example, the fact that so many people in the US wouldn't know the difference between a Welshman and an Englishman. It's one of those things where you can choose to take offence. If you really want to, with almost any cultural representation of any group. Being devil's advocate here, what is wrong then with labelling other groups of humanity as primitive, or as in particular things like savage? What's wrong with that?
If I say the word savage, what comes to mind for you?
Ooh, probably someone wearing very little clothes, jumping around, scratching at the wall, not much in the way of cognitive ability, just sort of generally a sort of a wild animal.
Right. So, you're in calling a group of people savages, you're in a way comparing them to an animal or a lesser form of being, and that's just, you know, peoples with complex, you know, cultural customs and people who are different from you and who just do things differently from you, that just because they do things differently does not mean that they are not intelligent, does not mean that they have any lesser cognitive function, and it creates this sort of bias against them. It creates fear. As you mentioned, it creates racism, and it just oversimplifies what could be, you know, a very rich cultural understanding of a group of people into just calling them something that almost seems like insignificant or lesser. And it also allows for this sort of implicit, or not even so implicit, like, this group of people is better than this group of people, which is not okay. I mean, I don't think any group of people is better inherently anyways. I mean, you know, you can get
I don't know. The other day I tried some Lucky Charms breakfast cereal, and I got to say, I think Britain is better. But then, okay, and so I guess just to try and sort of round this conversation up a little bit, it's one of those things where I think it's easy to as someone who, or as people who are aware of the conversations which are surrounded everything leading on from, say, the idea of cultural relativism all the way up to things such as how what we call something influences how we think about something. It's easy to take that knowledge and then just sort of criticise a red top newspaper, a tabloid newspaper in the UK. But I don't think that's really why we're here. That's not really certainly why I'm here. I'm not just going, oh, you know, I'm certainly not going, you know, you idiots for using that language. It's just one of those things where I don't know, what would be your favoured outcome if you could do anything in terms of helping people to use a different language? How would you achieve that? What would you encourage people to do differently? Would you have like a standardised lexicon of okay words, or?
I know that's tricky, right? Because I don't like, you know, like censorship or sort of policing people's vocabularies. I think that's very dangerous. I think it's just sort of about maybe getting as specific as possible when you're talking about something or someone. So don't say, you know, in the jungles there are people, they are cannibals, they attacked. You know, be like, well, maybe. I just think more mindful research in reporting and then more mindful research in discussion. So, like, if you read an article, even if that article actually does have more specific information, don't just go tell your friend, oh, yeah, there were some cannibals, they attacked someone. Like, why don't you say, these specific people went and attacked these two tourists.
So you're sort of saying don't settle for less in terms of grammar and description, and also, frankly, just fact-checking. Saying cannibals, jungle, things like savage, brutish, it's lazy language. That's really what the problem is here. It's not about slapping people around the head and saying, you know, why aren't you like me, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. It's just about sort of, fact-checking, engaging with material in a way that sort of allows for more specificity. And if you, I don't know, just being mindful, like if let's say you read an article that actually was detailed, but then the problem is when you go tell your friend, you be careful in the way that you simplify things, right? That's how information gets, I think, misrepresented. If there's, like, rather than just saying cannibals in the jungle, you know, say these specific, you know, tribal peoples from this clan, you know, did this. Now, why did they do it? Actually, you know, I don't know. Just it's kind of just employing critical thinking skills.
And you may well actually find that particular group have actually declared that they don't want people in their area of the forest. You might actually find that they are being legitimately violent. But at the very least, you're able to tie it down to more than just, clearly they just want to eat me. You know, it's something...
and sort of understanding the reasons why these things are occurring.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, okay. Well, I think we've sort of tackled quite a lot of the nub of the question there, and I would invite people at home or on the train or even on the toilets. Who knows where you watch these videos, people? I'd invite you to comment below, obviously after you've washed your hands, um, in terms of, I suppose, your thoughts on this topic, because it is a big one in so much as it's tempting to, I think, to use this language because it's dramatic, it's romantic, dare I say. It's got that sort of sense of Victorian exploring the jungle, finding the previously unknown, and in that sense, I think Jeanette can probably acknowledge that there is something. There's a reason why that stuff is tempting to use, but I guess what are your thoughts at home? We'd really like to read that, and maybe we'll revisit this topic in the near future. But this particular news story just grabbed my attention, and I certainly Jeanette was fascinated by it, and I just thought we'd just share our thoughts with you guys. So as ever, thank you so much to Jeanette for your time this evening.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to have this conversation.
You are very welcome. You're very welcome. And as ever, guys, until next time, do take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.